During the battle against the Elite 10, Megumi had to go up against this from Momo, the rose cupcakes, with her apple dorayaki, which are stuffed pancakes. Yukihito's rubbing off on her too much. Shiroan. So I developed this recipe with all of the things that we'll be needing to go forward with this Megumi Apple Dorayaki, and we're just gonna throw it away. Now, unfortunately, I could not find the proper beans, like lima beans, that were dry, so I ended up buying canned butter / lima beans. Now, you can use these canned beans, but what you really want to do is make sure that you remove the shell from the actual bean. This is in the form of a very clear casing around the bean, and the reason why you want to remove that is because it's super fibrous and actually doesn't puree very well. So yes, we're going to go ahead and peel every single bean, and you can see how meaty and fresh the other beans are and how much casing actually came off of these beans. This is the good stuff. This is what we want. Take all of those now peeled beans and put it into a fine mesh sieve or strainer. This is really important because this is going to let us break down all of the beans through this strainer. I tried using this little spatula to get some of the beans through the strainer, and it just took forever, so instead I ended up using a really big ladle like I was making mashed potatoes back at one of my old jobs. This actually gives it a very fine and consistent texture, which is what you want with the Shiroan, so that way it has a very smooth texture when it's all finished. You periodically want to lift the strainer and scrape the bottom to get all of that off of there, and once it is done, it's going to feel and look like soft Play-Doh. That's the texture that you're looking for, and you can see how soft and mushy it is. Now we do need to add some sugar to this Shiroan bean paste, and what we're going to use is 1 part beans to 1 part sugar. So for this I am using 1.5 cups worth of sugar to 1.5 cups of beans. I know it looks really weird and chalky right now, but as you have it over a very low heat so you don't scorch anything, the sugars are actually going to start turning this into a bit of a puree at first, and you can see how creamy it gets, mostly because we did shell all of those beans. Now you want to continue to cook this. This takes about 15 to 20 minutes of stirring, paying attention to it. Do not allow this to sit too long, otherwise the beans on the bottom will scorch. Now after 15 to 20 minutes of cooking, the color will change, but also the texture and the consistency will change. What we're looking for is to be able to part this entirely without it coming back together. You can see once I get you all up in there that you can see that it is parted and it is not coming back together. The two sides are not merging back together. You really want to make sure that you have this nice thickness to it so that way it stays consistent later. Now remove all this from your pot and put it into a separate bowl. We're going to cool this down to room temperature and then finally pop it into the fridge to cool down completely, so that way it'll thicken up really nicely. And I've never actually tried this before, but I was pleasantly surprised. This is delicious. Now for the apple ginger jam. For this, I'm actually using some Honeycrisp apples, and yes, we're using 2 types of apples for this entire thing. Go ahead and get all of these peeled off. You don't really want any of the skin on there because it won't produce a smooth enough jam. Take all of the apples that you did, well, I mean 2 apples that you had peeled, and we're gonna go ahead and dice these guys up into a small to a medium-sized dice. The reason why this dice is very important is because it's going to allow us to cook it a little bit faster. Usually when you make a jam, you could just use half pieces of apple and it'll be fine, but because Megumi is doing this on the fly, we want them a little bit smaller. To this, we're gonna go ahead and squeeze in 1/2 a lemon, and honestly, you need about 2 ounces worth of lemon juice, and we're gonna go ahead and season this. They don't really talk about seasoning the apple jam, but we're gonna hit it with a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg, and a little bit of ground clove. Hit it with a pinch of salt, and you're using about a teaspoon worth of everything. From here, we're gonna hit this with about a 1/2 cup of raw sugar, and give everything a nice toss. You want this totally incorporated, so that way you don't have any weird spice or sugar chunks throughout. Now for this apple and ginger jam, best practice would be to take these apples, place them in the fridge overnight so all the liquid starts leaching out of it that is not going to be needed for this. But she did this in a tournament setting, so I'm going to attempt to do this how she did it and just do it on the fly, which means a lot of cooking at a medium-low heat to try to get as much evaporation as possible out of the apples, and then finally cook it down into its jam-like consistency. We're gonna do it. So remove all of your apples and your spices and your sugars from your bowl. Try to squeegee out as much as you can. We're gonna move this over to the stove and cook this over a medium to medium low heat. I don't know what's going on with this spoon. I don't know why I still have it, but it still works. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the ginger yet. The reason why I wanted to start the apples first is because I wanted the ginger to be incorporated later to hopefully keep some of that really fresh taste while still being able to cook it. We're going to take about 2 ounces worth of our ginger and we're going to cut this into matchstick or julienne style size. Take your time with this. You do want to make sure you have consistent cuts here so that way when it's introduced back into the apples, you have nice sizes all the way throughout your jam. This is what your ginger should start to look like. From here, we're going to stack it all up and we're going to go ahead and brunoise this, which means, you know, just really small pieces. This is what your ginger should start to look like. Anything bigger than this and it's going to be too much of a bite. So take all of your ginger and pop it into your now apple jam. I know what you're thinking, Paul, this looks nothing like apple jam. What are you doing over here? Hear me out. This is going to make a lot of sense as we start cooking this thing down further. Once you have all of your ginger into here, we're going to add about 2 ounces worth of water and cook it down just a bit further. Then grab this guy and use it to your, you know, just gently use it. You actually don't want to smash these too hard. What I'm trying to do is break down some of the bigger pieces with this potato masher so that way we have a nice consistent jam. Give this guy a taste, see if it needs anything else, but it's amazing. Now get this thing in a separate bowl and we do have to get this cooled down so we can use it for later. Now we have our jam ready and we have our shiroan ready. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you guys. I've never made pancakes with tofu, but we're gonna wing it. We're gonna eyeball that. So now for our dorayaki tofu eyeballed pancakes, we want to crack 4 large eggs directly into your bowl with one hand just because for fun, and add about a ½ cup worth of sugar. To this we're going to add in 1 tablespoon worth of fresh honey and 1 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Gently start to bring this together, and then we're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon worth of baking powder and about 1 teaspoon worth of salt and start to bring this together once again. Now I'm going to have to process this tofu. Your best bet is to use a food processor or a blender of some kind, so I'm going to use this mini hand food blender. Break down your tofu by hand before putting it into your food processor just to make it a little bit easier. Throw the lid on it and start pureeing this thing. We are going to have to puree this for quite a while until it is completely, and I mean completely, liquefied. Once you have this beautiful creamy texture to it, pro tip, great for dips, we're going to go ahead and start slowly adding this into our actual batter. As you start to whisk this, you'll start to get the right consistency. You want to continue to add enough tofu until it starts to fully come together. In my case, I needed to add just about 2 tablespoons worth of water to get the right texture and consistency of my pancakes. Once you have your batter ready, it should hold together relatively well, but we do want to go ahead and give this a little bit of a taste test. In a lightly greased pan, I'm going to go ahead and drop in about 2 ounces worth of batter and cook this all the way through, and you can see that it has a really nice fluffy texture to it. I think the biggest problem is the pan that I have, so when we're ready, we're gonna bust out that guy, a little flat pan that I have, and it was only $14, so I mean, feel free to get one. But I think that's gonna be the key for these pancake things. That's not bad. Now again, use whatever you want to cook these things, but make sure it's on a low to a medium-low heat. You don't want too much heat, but I'm going to use about 4 ounces worth of our batter and spread these guys out just a bit. Once you start to see some bubbles form, they should be ready to flip. One of them looks amazing. The other one kind of looked a little jank, but it'll be okay. Go ahead and finish cooking off all of your pancake batter, and as you get better and better at using your skillet, these start to look amazing. Now we do need to let these cool down completely before we decide to use them so nothing starts to melt. So one of the secret weapons Megumi uses is this apple butter. Now, an apple butter traditionally is basically really cooked down applesauce with some pectin, and it's really nice and really thick and really spreadable. But in this, she actually uses butter, which apple butter doesn't normally have. I know it sounds really weird. Instead, she uses the Mount au Beurre technique, which means she makes an apple-like jam or sauce and mounts that with butter. And this is where Shinomiya yells at her, tells her that she's stirring it too softly, doesn't get it mixed right, but then she gets it all together, and I become your Shinomiya and I teach you how to make this apple butter. So now for the apple butter portion, we're actually going to be using green or Granny Smith apples, and that is because they hold up really well to the cooking process. After peeling them, we're going to slice these into about 1/4 inch thick slices, and then from here, again, we're going to do the whole matchstick julienne technique after stacking them. After getting all of your matchstick pieces, we're going to go ahead and turn the apple and then gently start slicing these to get the small dice pieces that you need. They should be relatively uniform in size and should look just about like this. Now, you don't have to do this, but it does look really good, and you could just honestly use some applesauce. In addition to this, we're going to need about 2.5 ounces worth of lemon juice. We're going to need this to actually deglaze the apples later. In a lightly greased, low heat pan, we're gonna add in all of our beautifully diced apples. We're gonna saute these up with just a bit of salt and about half of our lemon juice. Over a low-medium heat, after a few minutes, the apples themselves should start to caramelize. Once they reach a dark amber color, we're gonna add in the rest of our lemon juice. And then finally, hit it with about a tablespoon worth of fresh honey. Now with the heat completely off, stir this back together to get everything incorporated. Now here comes the very fun and interesting part. This is the Mount au beurre. You're taking very, very cold butter, adding it in a little bit at a time, and completely incorporating it before you add in the next dab of butter. We're adding in about 4 ounces worth of total cold butter to fully incorporate into our sauce. That's basically how you make a Mount au beurre. Remember, all you're doing is taking whatever sauce you have and you're mounting it with butter, but you want to make sure that the heat is off so it doesn't break that butter. You're using the butter to actually cool down the rest of your sauce. That's delicious. It's finally shokugeki time, and that means we have to get everything ready. First, we're going to take in a little bit of diced apple and add it to our shiroan, and the reason why I didn't do this before is because it would have oxidized. We want that really fresh taste. Now to assemble these, I'm going to add in just a little bit of our apple butter, the one we had just made with the mounted butter, onto each side of our pancake. We're then going to take a nice spoonful of the shiroan apples and place that right into the middle, and then finally for the coup de grace, we're going to take the apple ginger jam and place it in the middle as the umami bomb. Take the other pancake, place it directly on top, and gently press down onto your dorayaki, and realize you put way too much filling into this. What are you doing with your life? This is, I mean, come on, what is this? It's like a sandwich. It's like a pancake apple sandwich. That's not a dorayaki. We got to do this again. So now for the second round, we're going to use less filling, but first, again, we're going to start with the apple butter, followed by less of that shiroan, and then another dab of our apple ginger jam. Press this thing gently together, and hopefully it starts to look like a dorayaki. This one came close. This one's a lot better than the last one. And just like that, we have a Megumi Dorayaki, minus the emblem because I didn't have one. And there it is, guys, the Megumi Apple Dorayaki. Now, this has a ton of different styles of apple in it, like the apple butter, the apple ginger jam, the apples folded into the white bean paste. That was something that I wanted to do because it just gave it a different texture, and you could see it in the anime when they break open this thing. There's bits of apple that are a little bit bigger that didn't make sense with the other stuff, but I mean, pancake. I mean, that's pretty damn good. I have to keep eating to get to the middle, because that's where the jam is. Hold on. I get to the jam, you get the ginger in there now, and that's what they were talking about. As you continue to eat this, it has different layers of flavor all the way throughout. I was doing so good this week. You can see what the center kind of looks like now. A little bit of chunks in there, then you have all the purees. The white bean is really nice, it gives it a lot of body. This is really good. It was a crowning moment for Megumi. I thought she did an amazing job with something like this to try to elevate essentially street food. What's your favorite style of pancakes? To be honest, I still love me some pumpkin pancakes with some cheesecake cream cheese frosting because I have no self-control. My name is Chef PK, bringing video game and anime food to life. Get subscribed, and remember, keep playing with your food. Now I'm gonna go do 10,000 jumping jacks like Rock Lee.
When I speak, all cap with the speech till they caught up in the rapture. I'm so out of line with the phrase game. Let's take a break, been a long day.